money that has been appropriated in years past that have not been spent, that the president can, he believes, redirect for his top priority, which is building the wall.
Heather in the control room tells me the procedural hurdle has been cleared at this point. The Senate will begin to vote. And our understanding is that shortly after that, the president, once it is in, the president will likely declare a national emergency on border security. Our CBS News Radio, Steve Portnoy. Thank you very much, Steve, for joining us with this update.
You bet.
Well, we're going to take a quick break. We are watching, as I mentioned, Capitol Hill now, where a vote to avert a government shutdown is underway. Nancy Pelosi says she's got the Democratic votes. Mitch McConnell and the White House say that the president will declare a national emergency on border security. So what happens next? We've got those answers coming up after the break. Hi, everyone. I'm Rena Nine, and Tanya Rivera will join us in just a moment. Thank you for joining us. President Trump will sign Congress's border deal and declare a national emergency. Well, the Senate is voting this afternoon on the measure. It's expected to pass there and also pass the House. The bill includes more than $1 billion for new fencing, but it does fall short of the $5.7 billion that the president wanted for his wall. He's now expected to declare a national emergency to get that money for his barrier. Here's what Senate leaders said prior to the start of the vote.
I've just had an opportunity to speak with President Trump, and he, I would say to all my colleagues, has indicated he's prepared to sign the bill He will also be issuing a national emergency declaration at the same time. And I've indicated to him that I'm going to support the national emergency declaration.
In short, it represents a fair compromise that includes priorities from both sides of the aisle. There is word the president will declare a national emergency. I hope he won't. That would be a very wrong thing to do.
Joining me now, CBS News Capitol Hill producer Rebecca Kaplan. So, Rebecca, what exactly were the highlights from what Speaker Pelosi had to say?
So, Irina, we just wrapped up with Pelosi moments ago in this room, and she said the House is going to wait and see. They want to hear from the president, and they will review their options. Our correspondent, Nancy Cordes, asked her about going right ahead with a legal challenge, and she was like, I haven't said I'm going to do that. I want to wait and see what my options are and hear from the president directly. But she also warned that there are pretty serious implications to this decision to taking a national emergency. She suggested that in the future, a Democratic president could, for instance, declare a national emergency on gun violence. And she warned her Republican colleagues, don't be so quick to support this because this is an end run around Congress and it could come back to bite you in the future.
Yeah, that was interesting. She said we don't want to make an end run around Congress. So at this point, what are you hearing? Are we hearing from Republicans? Do they feel that they'll definitely have the votes? And will Democrats also have, does that change their voting at this point?
She actually kind of declined to get into how this might affect votes on the Democratic side. So we're really not sure. One interesting kind of side story of today is that most of the members of the House are actually out at funerals. There was a funeral this morning in Washington for Congressman John Dingell, who was the longest serving member of the House. And then later in the afternoon, there was one in North Carolina for Representative Walter Jones, who just recently passed away. So we actually have not seen a lot of lawmakers around the Capitol today to get their reaction to this. I can tell you that previously there were many lawmakers that are uneasy with the idea of a national emergency because of the future precedent that it sets. Even Minority Leader Kevin McCarthy had been saying we would really prefer to see a legislative solution to this problem instead of jumping straight to a national emergency. So we are waiting to see right now what the Republicans, especially top Republicans in the House, are going to signal that they will do on this bill.
We know at this point the president, the White House says the president will sign and declare this national emergency. Do we know, though, did Nancy Pelosi reveal how she plans to counter that national emergency?
She is really keeping all of her options close at this point, and all of this unfolded literally minutes before her press conference. So I think what we would expect to see is I think she wants to hear from the president directly, either have a conversation with him or see what he comes out publicly and says, because so far we have heard Mitch McConnell recount his conversation with the president. We have seen a statement from the White House, but as we know from past experiences, it's always best to hear from the president directly. So I think that's certainly what Pelosi said she is waiting for at this point. So I think it's going to be a wait and see situation until the president comes out and talks directly to the American people about exactly what he's planning to do.
Rebecca, if you can hang with us for a second, I want to bring in Sabrina Siddiqui. She's a CBSN political contributor and a White House correspondent for The Guardian. Sabrina, we know the president has this has been something in the works, but were you surprised to learn today that he was going to declare this?
Well, I think that it's something the White House has kept on the table since the outset of these conversations around funding for the government and the president's insistence that any spending bill include money for a border wall, which he did not get in this latest compromise. The challenge, of course, is that he has faced pushback from members of his own party, Republicans, who have said that this creates a dangerous precedent that a future Democratic president could also declare a national emergency around climate change or around gun violence to pursue what are progressive priorities on legislation. I think that having said that, the president really felt pressure to turn around to his supporters, to those more conservative voices who represent his base, and say that he was able to come out of this entire debate over funding for the government with some kind of win. Mm-hmm. And that compromise, you heard the White House express disappointment that it didn't really meet the president's goals. And so this is his way of looking to his supporters and saying, I'm doing everything I can to fight for this wall, even if it means fighting in the courts.
Sabrina, has the White House said anything about, we know that this potential of declaring a national emergency has been on the table. They surely must have known about the legal counter that could come. Have they said anything about how they would respond to those legal measures if they were taken?
Well, the White House has argued that the president has broad discretion when it comes to declaring an emergency or arguing that he is acting with national security as his priority. And although it's not by any means a similar declaration. If you look at the proclamation around the travel ban in several Muslim-majority countries, the Supreme Court gave the president wide latitude just based on that argument within and of itself, that this was a matter of national security, even when they didn't necessarily have the evidence to support that the travel ban was, in fact, an effective solution. So I think that you're going to see a very similar argument being made, that there is a crisis at the border and it is the president's responsibility to act with the best interests of Americans in mind. Of course, again, the evidence doesn't support the president's claim that there is an emergency at the border. The rate of illegal immigration, worth noting, has fallen rapidly over the last decade. Last year, the undocumented population in the U.S. reached a 12-year low. But all of this, I think, is what you'll see play out in the courts. I think the question will be, if he is ruled against in the lower courts, is this another issue under the Trump administration that will make its way all the way up to the Supreme Court, to the highest court in the land, where he now has cemented a conservative majority?
I want to turn now back to Catherine Watson, our Capitol Hill producer. Oh, excuse me, I apologize. I want to turn to Rebecca Kaplan, who's our Capitol Hill producer. Rebecca, you know, at this point, you were in the room with Nancy Pelosi there. What more did she have to say about sort of the Democratic strategy at this point?
I think at this point, it's really such a question of what happens at the White House and on the other side of the aisle. I think we do expect that in the next few hours, the Senate is going to pass this funding bill and send it over to the House. And all signs have been pointing to House passage of the bill as well, although it's definitely going to be a little bit narrow. You have some members who are unhappy. Some of the progressive members in Congress, Rashida Tlaib, Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez, Ilhan Omar, Ayanna Pressley, came out this morning and said they're not going to support this bill because they don't want any additional funding for immigrations and customs enforcement. You have some Republicans on the far right, allies of the president from the House Freedom Caucus like Mark Meadows and Jim Jordan, say this deal is bad because it's not going to secure the southern border. It's not going to prevent criminals from coming into the United States. And interestingly, even those members who were not necessarily pushing the president to go all the way to a national emergency from the start, Meadows and Jordan and two other colleagues, Andy Biggs and Matt Gaetz, wrote to the president today. They sent him a letter that urged him to use that national emergency power to move forward with building some sections of the wall, citing Section 10 of the U.S. Code, which could, in theory, give the Defense Department the authority to do some building on the southern border in the event of a national emergency related to drugs. You've also seen Democratic members from the House Homeland Security Committee start to introduce bills that would make it more difficult for the administration to build on the southern border. So I think, as Sabrina said, there is a very good challenge that this all ends up in the courts in the very near future.
Rebecca, I want to read you from Elizabeth Warren, 2020 contender in the Democratic Party, tweeted out, "Gun violence is an emergency. Climate change is an emergency. Our country's opioid epidemic is an emergency. Donald Trump's ridiculous wall is not an emergency." How does the 2020 candidates sort of weigh into this, and how does that factor into where they go with this whole discussion?
Well, as Pelosi pointed out in this press conference today, she was warning her Republican colleagues that just wait and you will see a Democratic president turn this on its head and use a national emergency declaration to address one of those issues, like gun violence, like the opioid epidemic, like climate change. And so that was her message today, was don't be so quick to move forward with this. And I think, as we saw from Elizabeth Warren, this is a great opportunity for those Democratic 2020 candidates to point out some of the big issues that they want to work on, things that they say are national emergencies, because Democrats say there is not a national emergency at the border, and they will have that as their platform to push these big issues.
I am hearing officially that they do have the votes right now in the Senate to push this forward and to move this legislation forward. I want to turn, do we still have Sabrina Siddiqui with us? Sabrina, hey, Sabrina, so tell us, where does this go from here? Is it expected, as we know the Democrats control the House, is this expected to make it through the House?
Well, I think that there was still optimism that there would be sufficient votes to pass this legislation through the House. I think appropriators, after weeks of negotiations, which faced their own ups and downs, felt like they got to a place where, yes, to Rebecca's point, there will be some hard-right conservatives who will vote no. There will be some progressives on the left who will vote no. Overall, there will be enough to send this measure to the president's desk. The question now is, has that changed because he's put a national emergency on the table? I think some of these lawmakers are kind of holding their powder. They want to hear from the president himself. But I think that there is very little appetite for another government shutdown. And so I don't think that there's any doubt, at least at this point in time, but they will still try and pass this spending bill and send it to the president's desk for his signature. In fact, that is very much why you saw the president come out today announcing his support through Mitch McConnell for this resolution, at the same time declaring a national emergency so that he can still say that he scored some sort of victory.
Rebecca, we've heard Republicans say that they're not really behind this national emergency declaration, but ultimately the president is really the head of their party. Do you see these Republicans turning on the president and going a different direction?
Well, it was actually a big deal today that Senate Majority Leader Mitch McConnell said he would support an emergency declaration because previously he had not been for the idea. He really wanted this to come through Congress instead. But I think what you're seeing right now is really this appetite from members not to have another shutdown. The 35-day shutdown that we just went through was pretty brutal for members and certainly for the American people. And polling did not show that the Republicans came out ahead. So I think right now, no one, I think, is going to stop this funding bill from going through because of the national emergency, or at least not enough to take it down. But I think we're really just going to have to see what exactly the president says he's going to do. We don't really know yet what an emergency declaration would look like, what legal justification he would use for this authority. So I think we're just going to have to wait and see how all of that unfolds in the coming days and what the appetite is for Republicans to take on the president. Frankly, they are not usually willing to do it. Really, the only thing that we have seen recently where the Republican Party has come out and started to push back on the president, and this is only some of them, is over some foreign policy issues. We have seen a war powers resolution to cut back U.S. involvement supporting Saudi Arabia in the Yemen conflict. That happened yesterday. You had a few Republicans come in to support Democrats. You've seen Republicans in the Senate support curtailing the president's foreign policy. But in general, over the last 2 years of this presidency, we haven't seen a number of instances where Republicans are willing to step up and tell the president to stop in his tracks. So I think it's going to be very interesting to watch this unfold over the next few weeks.
We're hearing Senator Collins on President Trump declaring a national emergency. I think it's a mistake going forward on this. Sabrina, at this point, you're hearing some Republicans, but to the point again, they have been pretty much, with exception of what Rebecca said recently on Yemen, pretty much lockstep with the president. Do you see people really going on the record and pushing back against the national emergency?
Well, up until this point, a number of Republicans were openly critical about the prospect of a national emergency. There were some who suggested that the president should take this action. Certainly Lindsey Graham, a senator from South Carolina, who is a close ally of Trump, he said that he thought the president should just declare a national emergency, and that would be the best way to move on from this debate. But you heard from Republican leadership all the way down to rank-and-file members of Congress. Many expressed reservations going back to that point that they do not want to create a precedent. But at the same time, to your point, they have been very reticent to take a public fight with this president. And so I think many of them have just resigned themselves to the belief that this president is going to do what he believes is best for himself, for his own agenda, for his own perception within the American public, as well as the base of the Republican Party. And they also know that he has strong support from the Republican base. So in many ways, if this is just an issue that plays out in the courts, it's something that Republicans on Capitol Hill don't really have to contend with directly. I think the biggest tell-all is that Mitch McConnell, who has said that he did not support a national emergency, came to the Senate floor and said this was essentially the deal that the president and I reached, that he would support this compromise to avert a shutdown, and I would support his national emergency declaration, which all but sets the tone for other Republican members of Congress that this was the only way to get the president to a yes, to prevent yet another shutdown after what was the longest shutdown in this country's history. And so, once again, we may not like the action that he's taken. He's the head of the party, and this is, of course, the direction he has chosen. The rest from this point on is up to the American public and to the courts.
I want to play for you Nancy Pelosi's reaction earlier this afternoon about the president declaring a national emergency.
The president is doing an end run about Congress, about the power of the purse. You've heard me say over and over again, Article 1, the legislative branch, the power of the purse, the power to declare war, many other powers listed in the Constitution, and, of course, the responsibility to have oversight. So the president is doing an end run around that. We will review our options. We'll be prepared to respond appropriately to it.
I want to turn to Rebecca Kaplan, CBS News, Capitol Hill producer. So, Rebecca, you know, we were hearing from some of the candidates, 2020 candidates. Kamala Harris tweeted out that this is calling the national emergency a president's vanity project, that it's ridiculous. Cory Booker saying, let's not forget the real emergencies in places like Puerto Rico. And Kirsten Gillibrand saying that this is a waste of taxpayer dollars. So with the lens of 2020, not just for Democrats, but for Republicans as well, how does that affect moving forward on this?
Well, it shows really that things are very difficult right now for everyone out there. But I think the kind of predominant feeling among most lawmakers is just wanting to avoid another shutdown at this point. But, you know, like I said, Democrats no one has been totally happy with this deal up on Capitol Hill. For Democrats, though, there were a number of wins in terms of keeping down the number of dollars being spent on border barriers. Democrats have been saying that there's no actual money for a border wall. Instead, they're pointing to about what they're going to pass today is about 55 miles of fencing. So this remains a contentious issue. I think what will be interesting is if the president does declare a national emergency, whether you see these candidates talk about using the same precedent to go out and declare national emergencies on other issues, on climate change, on gun control. But, you know, a lot of these, declaring a national emergency is a pretty extreme step and one that really has not been used by presidents for something like this. And a lot of these 2020 contenders are children of politics that follow the rules more than Donald Trump has in the past. So I don't think that we're going to see a rush of people saying that this is a great idea. I'm going to go out and do this on my issues. But I think we'll have to just wait and see what the president does to kind of give the full scope of how much ends up in court, how much passes muster with possibly with the Supreme Court and, of course, his own party. I
want to get your reaction to Senator Lindsey Graham, who said he tweeted out, this is money available to President real Donald Trump, that's his hashtag, in the current budget to move around and help build the wall. We'd be stupid as a party not to stand behind him. I can't think of a better issue to define the Democrat and Republican Party than this. Hashtag build the wall. We know Senator Graham has really recently stood in lockstep with the president. What do you make of his reaction?
Well, on face value, sure, there's money available in the budget. The president should take the money to build a wall. If you support a wall, that's a great idea. What gets much, much trickier is where exactly that money is coming from, because there's not just unallocated funds out there that these lawmakers can start pushing towards building a wall. That money is going to come from somewhere, be it the military construction budget. That's definitely one possibility. That's going to irk a lot of people who have a lot of interest in national defense and want to make sure that the military is properly funded. We saw the administration float this idea during the shutdown in January, the idea of possibly reprogramming some emergency funds to pay for the wall. And where would that have come out of? Disaster relief funds for Puerto Rico after the hurricane, for California after the wildfires, for Texas still feeling the after effects of Hurricane Harvey in Houston. And when you start to get into the idea of money, those pots of money being taken away from those lawmakers, from their districts, it gets much more difficult for them to just broadly support the idea of take this money, put it towards the wall, because it means something being taken away from their constituents. So that's really, the devil's in the details here. It's not as easy as just picking up, you know, the dollars that are stuffed in your couch cushions. That's not what this is. Every dollar is going to come from another project, and you are going to see lawmakers fight that transfer.
Ann Coulter, conservative figure in the world here in the U.S., tweeting out, there's no coming back from this. No emergency or presidential power will allow him to build the wall ever. After he signs this bill, Trump has just agreed to fully open borders. How fierce do you expect it? And is the president concerned at this point? Maybe I'll turn this to Sabrina Siddiqui. How concerned is the White House, and the president in particular, about pushback from conservatives like Ann Coulter?
Well, I think that that's what's driving a lot of his motivation in declaring a national emergency, that conservatives are up in arms over the prospect of the president signing this spending bill that did not follow through on his promise to build a wall. And frankly, that included less money toward border security than what Democrats had put on the table in the recent discussions to end the shutdown that took place over the course of December and January. If you think back to a year ago, Democrats had offered the president the full $25 billion he asked for toward the wall in exchange for permanent protection for Dreamers. The president also thwarted that opportunity. So I think that at this point he sort of boxed himself into a corner where he's had no real pathway to getting to that funding for a wall, especially given the newly minted Democratic majority in the House of Representatives, where they hold a lot of the leverage. So there's really no way that he actually can deliver on the promise he made to conservatives outside of this last-ditch resort to declare a national emergency. But it looks like, if you're already reading that reaction from the likes of Ann Coulter, it will not be enough.
Sabrina Siddiqui and Rebecca Kaplan, I want to thank you both for joining us with this breaking news. Again, the Senate has the votes to now pass the border bill to avert a government shutdown. It's going to turn to the House now. They're expected to pass it as well. And the president says when that's done, he will sign it, but he will also declare a national emergency. Quick break for now. Tanya Rivera has the rest of the day's news when we return. You're streaming CBSN.
Today marks 1 year since the massacre at Marjory Stoneman Douglas High School in Parkland, Florida. 14 students and 3 adult staff members were killed after a gunman opened fire in a shooting rampage. CBS News correspondent Adriana Diaz is outside the school with more on how the community is mourning the lives lost and fighting for change.
The community of Parkland is remembering all the lives lost 1 year ago at Marjory Stoneman Douglas High School. A sign at the school is encouraging students to be positive, passionate, and proud. Some spent the morning with first responders and visiting with service dogs. Linda Beagle-Shulman lost her 35-year-old son, who was a teacher at the school.
I walked down the path today And it was just like reliving last year when we walked down the path.
The school has beefed up security, adding more than 100 new cameras and doubling its security staff to 18. But students like senior Alea Eastman are demanding more.
Our lives depend on you. Our lives are in your hands.
She told her story on Capitol Hill last week.
When the gunman shot into our classroom, Nicholas Dorett was in front of me. As Nicholas fell, I matched his every movement and hid underneath his lifeless body.
Last year, there was a memorial here with crosses and stars of David representing the lives lost. But now the community has made a garden. Students and parents of victims say they're getting strength from the community, but also through activism. But national legislative change has been modest. Congress hasn't passed any new federal gun control laws, but has passed legislation allowing states and federal agencies to better share mental health and criminal records. States, including Florida, have passed 66 gun control bills. At least 7 states expanded background checks. A Florida commission investigating the shooting made dozens of recommendations last month, including metal detectors and so-called hard corners where students can hide. The district says it's adopted more than half of the recommendations so far. Adriana Diaz, CBS News, Parkland, Florida.
And here now to take a look at the public's opinion on gun policy 1 year after Parkland is Anthony Salvanto. He is the CBS News Elections and Surveys Director. Anthony, thank you so much for being here. Always a pleasure to talk with you. So you've put together some polling data 1 year after the shooting. Where do Americans now stand on gun control?
One of the things they told us is that they're frustrated, and this is actually covering people on all sides, people who think laws should be more strict, kept the same, less strict. That frustration cuts across all of that, and some, particularly for those who feel that they should be more strict, we even see some saying that they're still angry.
Right.
And part of that comes off of what we just saw, in the report, where you have seen legislation a lot in the states, but there still is, people tell us, a feeling out there that more could happen, particularly on a lot of things that people seem to agree on. And there's actually more of that than you might think.
That's interesting because it does break down somewhat on partisan sides, doesn't it, when it comes to gun control? Are there any areas that aren't partisan?
Well, in the abstract, it often does. So when you ask things like more strict versus less strict or kept the same, that's true. But you do see broad areas of policy agreement, especially when you ask about things that sort of cover this topic holistically. So you do get broad support for things like assault weapons bans or limitations. You do get broader support for background checks. You also get better broad support for mental health screenings.
So why then do these things not get traction? Because these have been in the news for a while. I mean, these are clearly issues that you say both sides of the aisle can agree on. Why has there not been legislation going forward? Is it because there's traction and then time, evaporates after a shooting and people forget about it and other issues come to the fore?
Well, one of the things that we noted a year ago when we did a deep dive into all of this in the polling, and we've tracked, is the suspicion from both sides on the motives of the other side, by which I mean, folks who are gun rights proponents often talk about how much responsibility they feel as responsible gun owners. And that's something that hasn't come across to everyone who is a gun control proponent. And likewise, gun control proponents often tell us that they don't mean to try to take away all guns or create wider gun bans. And yet people who are gun rights proponents often think that that side does.
That it's just the beginning, that it's a slippery slope.
Exactly. So that suspicion sort of haunts both sides, haunts the debate. And also there's sort of, this is classic in gun policy polling, is the intensity of it, which is to say that oftentimes we find people who say that they are gun supporters say that they will not vote for a candidate if they feel that candidate is in any way going to put limits.
But, this is very interesting because something that stood out to me from your polling is that the amount of people last year who said that they favored stricter gun laws was huge, right? Was over 50%.
56%.
Right, 56%. But then when asked to list the issues which are the most important to them, it doesn't rank in the top 5?
Well, there again, it's this difference in intensity. And that's one of the things in this area or in all of polling that it's always important to look at. There can be things that you care about, but it's often how much you care about them and what you're willing to do. Right. So for a long time, those folks who have said gun control laws should be kept where they are will rule out a candidate or rule out a party that they feel goes against that, whereas we've seen less of that on the side that would be for gun control.
Anthony Salvanto, thank you so much for joining us. And for more on how the shooting has impacted gun policy at the local level, let's bring in Doreen Christensen from Deerfield Beach, Florida. She's a senior columnist at the South Florida Sun-Sentinel. Doreen, welcome. You have worked on a year-long project revolving around this tragedy. You've interviewed 57 people directly impacted by the shooting. Can you tell us some more about your work there?
Absolutely. Thank you so much for having me. My reporting partner, senior photographer Mike Stocker, and I, right after the tragedy, undertook this project called Voices of Change. And Mike conceived of the project. He wanted to get closer to the people that suffered through this horrendous tragedy that happened in our community. So we decided to do portraits that morph into video, and basically, we interviewed 57 different people and one dog, and we talked to families, victims, people who survived the shooting, many of the people in the Parkland community, and they told us their harrowing, sad tales of what happened in classrooms that day when students and teachers died, what happened on the first and third floors of Marjory Stoneman Douglas High School in the 1200 building. And I'll be honest, there were a lot of tears in front of the camera and behind the camera while we were conducting our interviews.
I can imagine. It must be so hard for you and everyone working on this project to absorb all of those stories, but we thank you for the work you're doing there. Families and friends of Parkland victims have been working in various ways, as you know, to enact change. But can you talk to us specifically about the group Stand with Parkland? Who is in it, and what is their mission?
Yes, well, many of the 17 families we interviewed for the project talked about this nonprofit that they started called standwithparkland.org. And basically, the 17 families came together and agreed on 3-point principles for change. They would like to see responsible gun ownership. They want to see more mental health counseling and screening, and they want to see safer schools shown through the prism, obviously, of their activism. They don't want people to be divisive on this issue. They want them to come together and find consensus. And that's what their organization is about. And that's why they have worked so hard to try to get their message out, that they feel that we can make change and we can come to an agreement about the changes that need to be made when it comes to gun violence in America.
And as you pointed out, it's not a partisan organization. Doreen Christensen, we thank you so much for your time.
Thank you so much for having me.
And a quick programming note, tonight you can stream our CBSN original 39 Days. It takes a look at how Marjory Stoneman Douglas High School mobilized in the days following the shooting. It streams tonight at 8 and 11 Eastern on CBSN and is available anytime on CBSNews.com. Coming up, Vice President Pence takes U.S. allies to task for their dealings with Iran. We will tell you which countries he called out. And Michael Cohen is known as the president's former fixer, but behind the scenes, he may have craved the political spotlight himself. We'll explain. This is CBSN, always on.